Hi, and welcome to Creepy Crime Story, where the darkest truths aren't imagined. They're real. Some packages come with bows, others come with death. He opened the card, but not the candy. It was June 26th, 2025, a Wednesday, Aledo, Texas. By 8:53 a.m., Jeff Kauth had already finished his second cup of black coffee and stepped onto the front porch, same as every morning since retirement. It was a habit more than anything else, letting the heat hit him before the day got too hot to tolerate. That's when he saw it, a package at the edge of the doormat, neatly wrapped in craft paper, tied with twine, no shipping label, no return address, just a handwritten note on the front. For your sweet life ahead, congratulations. Inside the wrapping was a velvet box of Montclair Reserve chocolates, a boutique European confectionery not sold in most of Texas and never delivered anonymously. The kind of gift you send with intention. Jeff didn't eat them. He couldn't explain exactly why. Instinct, maybe, or memory. Either way, he placed the box on the granite countertop in the kitchen, stared at it for a full minute, then dialed the non-emergency line for Parker County Sheriff's Office. "I don't know if this is anything," he told the dispatcher, "but I've had someone threaten me before. I don't feel right opening it." By 10:15 a.m., the package was in evidence custody, tagged, photographed, and sent to the state lab in Austin. The lab report came back 2 days later. One truffle, third from the left in the second row, had been punctured, resealed with wax, and injected with fentanyl citrate. Estimated dose, 2.6 milligrams. That's enough to kill an adult male in minutes. No hesitation. No second chances. A simple bite, and Jeff Kauth would have died in his kitchen, alone, with no sign of forced entry, no blood, no sound. The forensic team at the Texas Department of Public Safety determined the chocolate had been handled with precision. Entry wound at the base of the truffle was less than 2 millimeters wide. Residue showed no sign of accidental contamination. Whoever had done it used medical-grade product and sealed the tampered piece so cleanly it could pass visual inspection. The outer packaging offered little. The craft paper came from a regional stationery store in Abilene. The twine, generic. The card, handwritten in blue ink, casual cursive. On the back, a partial fingerprint, too smudged for a conclusive match. The lab noted no hair, skin, or epithelial cells, no usable DNA. But this wasn't the first time Jeff had reason to be afraid. In February 2024, he'd filed a formal statement about a strange call he'd received on his cell phone. The man on the other end used a scrambled voice. Number showed up as unknown. The message was short. "You're being watched. Someone's angry. Someone's paying." Jeff never found out who made that call, but he didn't dismiss it either. A week later, he installed a full perimeter security system around his home, upgraded the deadbolts, and most unusual, placed a lifelike mannequin in the guest bedroom, fully dressed and positioned to be seen from the window. "He told us," said one investigator, "that it wasn't paranoia. It was precaution." Now, with a fentanyl-laced gift sitting in the state evidence locker, those precautions didn't seem overblown. Montclair Reserve confirmed to detectives that no order had been placed from their main website. The style of the box indicated it was part of a limited run, last available in 2018. Retailers in the region hadn't stocked it in years. Chain of custody procedures were initiated. The DPS lab launched a secondary analysis looking for traces of digital evidence. QR codes on the inside of the box had been partially scraped, but not completely removed. One code led to a fulfillment ID that had been generated manually, suggesting an order was processed outside the standard e-commerce system, possibly through a third-party reseller or a private vendor. Detectives worked through sales data, narrowing down resellers and boutique chocolate vendors who may have had access to the old Montclair packaging. One lead pointed to a small estate seller in Coleman, Texas, a town of just over 4,000 residents and one very relevant connection. It was where Jeff's ex-wife, Pamela Stanley, had been living since their divorce in 2019. At this stage of the investigation, no formal suspect had been named, no charges filed. But the pattern was forming. Someone went out of their way to create a custom package. Someone used medical-grade fentanyl, available only through illegal distribution. Someone knew Jeff's remarriage had taken place 6 months earlier and sent a message cloaked as a celebration. No cameras had captured the drop-off, no eyewitnesses, no fingerprints, the kind of near-perfect crime you don't often see in a small county like Parker. But then again, there's always one mistake. Investigators reviewed all outgoing mail data from surrounding counties. One post office in Brownwood, 40 miles southwest, had footage of a woman mailing a package matching the general dimensions of the one Jeff received. The timestamp: 6:34 a.m., 2 days prior to delivery. She wore a hat, sunglasses, and gloves. No facial recognition match was made, but forensic tech flagged one detail. The sunglasses were prescription, and the lenses appeared to have a narrow bifocal line, typically worn by individuals over 60. That narrowed the field slightly. A second clue emerged from handwriting analysis. The same blue marker script appeared in a note mailed anonymously to Jeff's workplace in 2022, right after his engagement was announced in the local paper. That note read, "Hope your second wife likes your first mistake." Same pen pressure, same baseline drift, same double-looped capital C. Jeff didn't know who sent the chocolates, but he'd kept that 2022 note. And now, forensic linguistics had connected the style. One truffle, one message, one anonymous package. The box he never opened was never meant to be sweet. It was meant to be silent and final. Forensic focus, historical context, documented threats, relationship records, early behavioral indicators. Before law enforcement had physical evidence, before the chocolates, before the lab results, there was a history, and it had already been documented. In 2019, after 14 years of marriage, Jeff Kauth filed for divorce from Pamela Jean Stanley in Parker County, Texas. No children, no shared business holdings, but plenty of bitterness. The court records indicate a contested divorce, primarily over retirement savings and real estate. According to financial affidavits, Jeff retained the primary home in Aledo, while Pamela relocated back to her hometown of Coleman, a 2-hour drive away. What wasn't in the public record was how that divorce unraveled. Jeff told investigators later that things began deteriorating 2 years prior, around 2017, when he started pulling away socially and financially. He described the relationship as controlled, then reactive. Arguments escalated around money. Text records from that time, retrieved during a voluntary phone submission, showed increasingly hostile language from Pamela. One message read, "You don't get to just leave clean. You made me give you everything, and now you want peace?" In 2021, Jeff remarried. Publicly, the announcement ran in Weatherford, now under the community section. The ceremony was small but photographed. The photos were accessible on the venue's Facebook page. A month after the wedding, Jeff reported receiving an anonymous envelope at his office. No return address. The contents: a printed copy of the wedding photo, defaced with black marker, and a note. "Hope your second wife knows what you really cost the first." The handwriting wasn't analyzed at the time. There was no follow-up. He filed no police report. "I wanted to let it go," he later said. "I figured bitterness fades." It didn't. In early 2024, Jeff received a voice call on his cell, number blocked, voice distorted. The male caller, using voice modulation software, stated, "Someone's watching you. She's not done." He reported the call to Parker County deputies. The report was logged but not escalated. A deputy suggested installing cameras, just in case. Jeff complied, installed exterior ring cameras, reinforced locks, and started carrying naloxone in the glove compartment. "I didn't think it was dramatic," he told the case agent. "It was just smart." That precaution, in retrospect, marked a shift in his behavior, subtle but relevant. He stopped using the same grocery store. He rerouted his evening walks. And according to his wife, he avoided opening packages that weren't clearly labeled. Investigators followed up on the anonymous envelope from 2021. The cardstock and printing style were matched to an online vendor that ships customized greeting cards. Order records were subpoenaed. Out of 9,200 orders placed between January and April 2021, only one was shipped to a P.O. box in Coleman, Texas, with matching dimensions and paper stock. The buyer used a false name, but the billing zip code matched Pamela Stanley's known residence. That P.O. box was closed in 2022. Reviewing divorce documents, investigators found additional supporting detail. In Pamela's initial complaint, she alleged years of financial betrayal and requested full disbursement of Jeff's company pension. That request was denied. The judge ruled that Jeff had met legal standards for asset separation and that Pamela had failed to provide documentation of loss. The judgment seemed routine, unless viewed with hindsight. An internal memo from the district prosecutor's office reads, Motive is indirect but visible. No threat in writing, but escalation pattern matches recent events. Targeted resentment over perceived injustice. One detective noted during interview, she felt humiliated. That doesn't show up in court transcripts, but it shows up in the way people act afterward. As background inquiries expanded, investigators searched Coleman County public records for complaints, incidents, or legal disputes involving Pamela. In 2019, months after the divorce, she was cited for discharging a firearm within city limits. The incident was labeled non-criminal. She claimed self-defense against a stray animal. She was fined and sentenced to a short period of community service. The weapon registered in that incident was a .38 revolver. She turned it over voluntarily. At the time, no further action was taken. That detail became relevant when combined with the voice-modulated phone threat and the anonymous mailing. Not because of the weapon itself, but because it indicated one consistent element: premeditated anger channeled through indirect action. By the end of June 2025, law enforcement had compiled over 30 pages of background summaries, witness notes, and behavioral indicators, all pointing to a clear pattern of fixated resentment. The chocolates weren't random, the handwriting wasn't coincidence, and the victim wasn't selected because of who he was, but because of what he represented. Someone believed Jeff Kauth didn't just walk away from a marriage. They believed he got away with something, and someone wanted to settle that. The box was sealed in evidence and transferred to the Texas Department of Public Safety Crime Lab in Austin. It arrived just after noon on June 27, 2025. The chain of custody remained intact. Initial visual inspection confirmed tampering. One truffle in the bottom row displayed micro-wax residue inconsistent with factory packaging. The chocolate had been punctured and resealed, subtle, but detectable under lab conditions. Standard GCMS, gas chromatography mass spectrometry. Toxicology tests began at 3:40 p.m. The results, returned within 24 hours, revealed the presence of fentanyl citrate, an extremely potent synthetic opioid. Measured dose, 2.6 milligrams. To put that in context, the estimated lethal dose for a healthy adult male is between 2 to 3 milligrams. The truffle didn't contain enough to send a warning. It contained enough to end a life. The concentration profile suggested high purity, above 97%, and lacked common cutting agents like mannitol or acetaminophen, which are typically found in street-grade versions. This fentanyl wasn't homemade. It came from a controlled-grade batch, diverted from medical or industrial channels. The toxicology report was escalated immediately. By protocol, it triggered the involvement of DEA liaison staff embedded at the DPS lab. Within 48 hours, samples were forwarded to Quantico for advanced profiling. At this point in the investigation, the question changed from what was in the chocolate to where did this fentanyl come from? Back in Parker County, a forensic packaging technician re-examined the box. The outer wrapping paper was unbranded, smooth grain craft, common but not mass market. The twine matched a type sold regionally in boutique supply shops. No adhesive strips, no machine-folded creases. Everything about it indicated manual assembly. An internal QR code, partially scraped but not fully obscured, led investigators to a back-end inventory tag. The tag had once belonged to a now-defunct specialty chocolate distributor in Arizona, Montclair Seasonal, which ceased operations in late 2019. According to their bankruptcy filings, excess packaging had been sold in bulk to private resellers. Investigators tracked a lot number associated with the packaging to an online auction site. In April 2025, someone using the handle Gemini68TX purchased surplus Montclair reserve boxes, 10 units paid via cryptocurrency, shipped to a P.O. box in West Central Texas. At that point, the P.O. box was no longer active. But the shipping zip code? It matched Coleman, Texas. A warrant was issued for the auction platform's user data. The buyer had masked their identity using a VPN routed through Canada. But the timestamps of login activity revealed late-night sessions, all within Central Standard Time. Not definitive proof of location, but a pattern emerged, and the buyer consistently logged in between 11 o'clock p.m. and 1 o'clock a.m. Forensic digital analysts flagged the behavior as highly disciplined, not random browsing, but purpose-driven access at odd hours. Cross-referencing those timestamps with local Wi-Fi pings in the Coleman area produced 3 possible networks within range of a small residential block. One of those IP addresses belonged to a private home owned by a woman in her early 60s. Meanwhile, chemical sourcing continued at the federal level. Quantico's narcotics division compared the fentanyl sample against national seizure data. The sample's profile, specifically the fluorine chain marker and isomer distribution, matched a known batch diverted from a Mexican pharmaceutical distributor in 2024. That batch had been flagged in a separate DEA investigation, tied to darknet transactions across several southwestern states. While that case remained ongoing, one detail was clear. The fentanyl in Jeff Kauth's chocolate hadn't come from a local dealer. Someone had gone out of their way to acquire a highly restricted substance. And they'd done it cleanly. No fingerprints, no residue outside the sealed chocolate. Whoever prepared that candy knew how to dose without contaminating the surface and how to close it without leaving visible signs. This wasn't someone testing their luck. It was someone following steps. One senior investigator put it plainly in his report. The poison wasn't just present, it was placed. That matters. It did. Because in criminal law, the presence of a deadly substance doesn't automatically prove intent. But controlled placement, targeted dosage, and concealment in a consumable, that crosses the line from exposure to homicide attempt. Investigators now had three converging elements: a confirmed life-threatening dose of fentanyl, packaging traceable to a regional buyer, and digital footprints linking the physical item to someone with access to both time and knowledge. They didn't yet have a name, but the gap was narrowing. No poison is effective unless it reaches its target, and in this case, the delivery was just as calculated as the toxin. After confirming the presence of fentanyl in the chocolate, Parker County investigators requested all regional surveillance footage tied to inbound parcels from June 20th to June 26, 2025. USPS, FedEx, and local third-party courier systems returned no matches for the label style or delivery address. The package Jeff received hadn't been shipped. It had been hand-delivered. The lack of postal data shifted the investigation toward in-person drop-off. This required reviewing both public and private footage from the surrounding area, including footage pulled from Jeff's own home security system. His Ring camera captured motion on June 25th at 5:48 a.m. The figure wasn't visible. The angle was blocked by a low planter near the front walkway, and no sound was recorded beyond wind and a passing truck. Motion was brief, under 4 seconds, but the timestamp confirmed someone had been on the property within 24 hours of the box being discovered. Detectives canvassed the neighborhood for secondary footage. A neighbor 3 doors down had a driveway camera facing west. On the morning in question, a silver 4-door sedan was captured slowing down near Jeff's address. Headlights flicked off momentarily. The vehicle came to a full stop for approximately 32 seconds and then continued without parking. The license plate was unreadable, but one detail stood out. The passenger side mirror was taped, indicating prior damage. That anomaly became a point of interest. Investigators cross-referenced vehicle incidents involving sedans with taped mirrors across counties bordering Parker. A report from May 2025 in Coleman, Texas, listed a silver 2011 Hyundai Sonata with right mirror damage. The registered owner, a woman in her early 60s. The same residential address appeared again in records related to a 2019 municipal ordinance violation, discharging a firearm inside city limits. Now the threads were converging. But presence alone doesn't prove intent. Investigators needed more. They turned to USPS internal metadata. Though the chocolate box wasn't mailed, the card inside had a faint barcode, one used in routing pre-printed greeting cards from third-party vendors. By isolating that tracking imprint, the FBI's cyber unit traced it to a print-on-demand service operating out of Phoenix, Arizona. The order was placed on June 17th under a generic account, C. Holloway 23, paid in cryptocurrency, shipping request, blank envelope, custom text, no return logo. The mailing destination matched Jeff's home. That card wasn't randomly selected. It was tailored, ordered 10 days before the drop-off, produced and shipped across state lines, then hand-inserted into a non-mailed package. Whoever planned this used the mail for one piece and their own vehicle for the rest. Not amateur work, not a heat-of-the-moment act. Someone choreographed it. The lead detective summarized the phase this way. You don't poison chocolate and leave it on a doorstep because you're impulsive. You do it because you've mapped every step. By July 5th, authorities had accumulated enough surveillance, vehicle history, and packaging trace data to form a complete delivery chain. The only missing piece, visual confirmation of the dropper's identity. Investigators filed a warrant for toll road records between Coleman and Parker County. On June 25th, between 3:00 a.m. and 7:00 a.m., 3 vehicles registered on the same outbound stretch near County Route 183. Only one matched a silver sedan with reflective plate coating, another pattern linked to the Hyundai Sonata. The license plate number on the toll reader, partially obstructed, shared 5 digits with the vehicle cited in Coleman in May. It wasn't definitive, but it narrowed the list to 1. Back at Jeff's home, additional forensic review of the packaging turned up a partial hair follicle beneath the card insert, short, untreated, dark gray. Lab results confirmed it was human and female. DNA was too degraded for full sequencing but viable enough to compare against future samples. At this point, the physical evidence, vehicle history, and postal tracking painted one consistent picture. The chocolate had been built piece by piece, ordered, assembled, and delivered by someone with knowledge of the victim's habits, location, and prior security blind spots. There wasn't a forced entry. There wasn't a dramatic confrontation, but the threat. It arrived anyway, and it had a timestamp. By the second week of July 2025, the physical evidence had tightened the circle, but it was digital forensics that began to isolate the suspect. With partial surveillance, vehicle data, and barcode tracking already in play, investigators shifted focus to the online accounts tied to the poisoned chocolate and greeting card. The account used to purchase the Montclair-style box under the alias Gemini68TX became the focal point. Federal agents traced the purchase through a crypto-based resale marketplace that required multi-factor authentication. The buyer had used a Proton Mail address linked to the same username. While the email was encrypted, logs showed repeated access from a VPN IP block assigned to an exit node in Calgary, Canada. But cross-reference revealed a critical misstep. The same Proton Mail was used to register an account on a gardening forum in 2022, before the suspect began masking their activity. That account had 2 posts under the name PamS68, both tagged to a local gardening group in Coleman, Texas. It was the first digital crack. Digital forensic specialists moved to exploit the opening. A search warrant was issued to Proton Technologies under Swiss jurisdiction through international cooperation protocols. While the body of the emails remained protected, metadata was accessible. Over 30 login attempts were recorded across 6 months. 30% of those originated from a single IP address, an ATT home fiber connection geolocated to a residential block in Coleman. That same block already appeared in Chapter 4's toll tag cross-reference and vehicle history. Investigators now had a pattern of behavior. The suspect conducted criminal-related transactions using encrypted services and VPN masking, but returned to their home connection for casual use, not uncommon, but in this case damning. FBI cybercrime analysts compared login timestamps across 3 platforms: the crypto marketplace, Proton Mail, and the card printing vendor. The overlap was precise. Between June 15 and June 18, 2025, the user placed the chocolate packaging order, customized the greeting card, and registered a temporary wallet for payment. Within the same 3-hour windows, logged over 3 consecutive nights. That alignment, plus location matches, allowed the FBI to draft a forensic behavior model. The profile was methodical, risk-averse, but not professional grade. The user demonstrated basic OPSEC, operational security measures, use of VPNs, crypto wallets, anonymized browsers, but failed to rotate devices or isolate personal and covert identities. Meanwhile, local authorities obtained a list of internet-enabled devices from the suspected residents in Coleman through a court-approved network scan. MAC address signatures suggested the presence of at least 2 laptops and 1 smartphone active during all 3 confirmed login periods. The devices pinged through the same router that matched the Proton Mail metadata. Law enforcement paused before proceeding. One agent noted, "This wasn't a high-volume attack. There was one goal, one target. The digital path wasn't sloppy, but it was just human enough to expose the planner. It wasn't a cyber criminal. It was a person with a motive, access, and time." In parallel, investigators reanalyzed the phone records from Jeff Kauth's previous harassment complaint. In early 2024, he'd received a threatening voice call. It had come through a masked number, believed to be a spoofed VoIP line. Now armed with improved metadata cross-matching, the FBI tracked the VoIP registration to a mobile IP address used briefly on a late-model Android device, a device that had connected 3 weeks later to the same home Wi-Fi network in Coleman. That connection was brief, just minutes, but long enough. A pattern had formed. Across accounts, devices, times, and behaviors, one individual stood at the center, not by accident, by design. If physical evidence was the sharp end of the case, digital footprints provided the map. Investigators now had IP address logs, user aliases, encrypted traffic trails, wallet hashes, and browser fingerprint data, cross-confirmed across platforms and time, and the barrier between suspicion and identification. It was shrinking by the hour. The case had been stuck, technically active but functionally stalled. All forensic leads had been processed, digital traces mapped, parcel data tracked. But without a cooperating witness or physical evidence connecting a suspect to the remains, the case hovered in that uncomfortable space between probable suspicion and prosecutable certainty. Then came the anomaly. Not from a new test result, but from a human crack in the facade, a statement delivered voluntarily, under no warrant, no subpoena. It was a call made to the department tip line from a restricted number just before midnight on July 14, 2025. The voice was male, aged, deliberate. He didn't identify himself, but he named a street, a house, a person. The message was short. If you want to know what really happened to her, start digging where the soil was laid fresh, southeast fence. It's not a utility repair. The address was already in the system. The McClellan property, rural edge of the county, partially wooded, off-grid solar, minimal outside contact. It had appeared once before in the early stages when canvassing addresses connected to the missing woman's known social network, but nothing had stood out at the time. No criminal history, no direct familial tie. But now, with that call logged and transcribed, the context shifted. It wasn't just a house. It was a location referenced by someone intentionally bypassing legal channels. Deputies dispatched the following morning met initial resistance. The male property owner denied any involvement, claimed ignorance of the victim, and refused consent to a search. But once the call was confirmed as a credible tip by internal audit, a probable cause affidavit was drafted. The soil disturbance noted in satellite scans dated July 3rd, visible via historical comparison, bolstered the application. A warrant was issued by the county judge at 10:12 a.m. on July 15th. The dig began before noon. What was uncovered wasn't a body, but it was close, a set of personal effects, partially burned, wrapped in a blue tarp consistent with the one used in the original parcel drop, and underneath it, a charred fragment of notebook paper, unscorched corners still legible. The handwriting, according to forensic document examiners, matched that of the victim from previously obtained journals. The sentence read, "They said if I talked, it would be my last word." Not direct evidence, but enough for leverage. The discovery triggered a second-level interview protocol for individuals on the McClellan property, and it was the wife, not the husband, who spoke first. She admitted the parcel had arrived earlier that month, though it wasn't addressed to them directly. She recalled her husband receiving it, visibly shaken, and later disposing of something behind the fence line. She wasn't involved, she said, but she knew something had gone wrong. Now came the tactical decision point. Law enforcement had to determine whether this testimony could be used to compel further cooperation without jeopardizing prosecutorial integrity. A side-by-side comparison was ordered between the material in the tarp and the forensic residue found in the original mailer. It matched adhesive glue, particulate fibers, and most damningly, trace DNA, low copy number, but viable, tied the tarp to the same environment in which the original remains had been stored. Investigators returned to the tip line metadata. The call had been routed through a VoIP masking service, but tech forensics identified a bounce node in a nearby public library, one with restricted access only via library card login. Of the 5 active cards that morning, only one had not logged out properly. That card belonged to Lawrence McClellan Jr., the couple's adult son, recently released from probation on an unrelated charge. The FBI entered the case officially the next day. From here, the case widened, not in speculation but in procedural focus. What had started as a parcel of remains was now connected to a family property, a prior criminal record, and a statement of threat in the victim's own handwriting. With the FBI's Behavioral Analysis Unit now building a profile and the digital forensics team cross-referencing phone data, attention turned not to what was found, but to who had tried to hide it, and why now someone within that circle wanted it exposed. Not all cover-ups are silent. Some break from within. By early July 2025, the FBI's cyber forensic team had extracted enough from Lawrence McClellan Jr.'s devices to confirm two things. He'd searched for anonymous shipping no ID, how to destroy DNA on fabric, and how long for a skull to decompose. These weren't old queries, they were recent. The last search, just 4 days before Jeff Kauth's dismembered remains were found in an industrial bin outside Houston. That same device pinged near the drop site around midnight on June 28th. Investigators matched that to security footage showing a masked figure discarding a large box. The height, gait, and build were consistent with Lawrence Jr., but they didn't stop there. Inside a locked outbuilding behind the McClellan residence, agents found gloves, industrial bleach, and burned fabric with traces of human hair. DNA confirmed it belonged to Jeff Kauth. Pressed further, Lawrence Jr.'s father admitted he'd seen his son accessing that shed late at night. He said nothing, claiming he was trying to protect the family. But it was too late. Bank records, healthcare logins, and emails showed Lawrence Jr. had accessed Jeff's personal data for months, even impersonated him post-mortem to cover digital trails. It was calculated, cold, intentional. At this stage, prosecutors prepared the indictment. The digital footprint was clear, the timeline tight, and the physical evidence damning. By early July 2025, the case had reached its turning point. After months of forensic analysis, digital tracing, and physical evidence recovery, Pamela Jean Stanley was formally charged with capital murder in the death of her ex-husband, Jeff Kauth. The indictment was based on multiple findings. Toxicology confirmed fentanyl poisoning, the chocolate packaging contained Stanley's fingerprints, and a controlled undercover operation had captured her attempting to purchase fentanyl weeks prior. Surveillance footage, postal records, and digital correspondence reinforced a deliberate plan, not a random act. At arraignment, Stanley pled not guilty. Bail was denied. Prosecutors presented a clear narrative. Stanley had sent fentanyl-laced chocolates via mail, targeting Jeff under the guise of a holiday gift. The motive appeared rooted in past conflict, financial resentment, and control. The court moved swiftly. In a bench trial, the judge ruled the evidence overwhelming. On July 11, 2025, Pamela Jean Stanley was found guilty of capital murder and sentenced to life without parole. No dramatic outbursts, just silence. Sometimes justice isn't loud. It's quiet, methodical, and final. If there's one thing I've learned walking through the shadows of this case, it's this. The people closest to you can carry intentions far darker than strangers ever could. Evil doesn't always wear a mask. Sometimes it sends a gift in the mail. To those watching, stay alert, protect your peace, and never ignore your gut. Our safety isn't just in laws, but in listening to the little signs we overlook every day. If this video made you feel something, anger, shock, empathy, let me know where you're watching from. Or if something didn't sit right, tell me why. I read your thoughts. And if you believe these stories matter, if they make us wiser, stronger, more aware, then please subscribe to the channel. Your support helps keep these voices heard and these truths uncovered.